The previous example, we had looked at how we can output content using an input text. And in this example, I'm just going to take this a few steps further, and we're going to create some additional input fields. So looking at checkboxes and drop downs, radio buttons, and so on. And we'll see how Vue handles these as well. So this input type is going to be checkbox. So I'm going to update it to a checkbox, and I'm going to give it a value here. So we're just going to say yes for this checkbox. So if it's checked, the value is going to be checked. And I'm just going to get rid of some of this excess here and save that. So we've got a checkbox now, and we're going to bind it to a variable called myCheck. So I got to add that in here as well. So it's always a good idea whenever you do some binding to always make sure you add it into the data. Even if it's blank, you want to make sure that you do have the ability and the access for this. So our value for the checkbox, we're just going to say it's false. Or maybe we can say it's true, so we actually see something happening here. So let's refresh, and we see that we've got it by default, it's checked. So whenever I uncheck it, we see that it coincides with my check, so it goes true and false as I'm interacting with that checkbox. So there's also things like radio buttons. I'm going to add in some radio buttons just quickly just below here and show you how that Vue treats these ones as well. So of course, forms are always really important within whenever we're working with our HTML content with elements. So I'm going to just maybe call it Vue model is going to be radio, and this is going to be a value of 1. And I'm going to just add in a second one really quickly. So radio, Vue model, and this one's going to be a value of 2. And then of course I have to bind that into the data down here. So we're going to give it a value of 1. And of course we could start that out as blank as well. So we see that as we click through them, all it does is pass over that value in the radio buttons. Another common form element that we see quite often is the drop down, so that select box, and again we're using Vue model, and what this again just binding that data over to, so I'm going to call it my SEL for the select items. Here we're going to have some options, and we're going to list out a bunch of the options here that are available. So option, and I'm going to give it a value and create a few additional options just really quickly there. So I'm going to give that one 2 and give that one 3, 2 and 3, so everything matches up there. And now we need to bind some data into there. So just comma separate it for that object information. And maybe this time we'll just leave it blank. I'll just show you what happens now. So now we've got our drop down list there, and we see as we're selecting it, the values are changing there. So it's the same thing as the other form information. So if I want to start out at a value of 2 and have that selected, it's by default started off at that selected item. And this is actually really cool because a lot of times when you're developing forms and you're pulling out data from your database, you always have to loop through all the values here and make sure that you get that selected one. Well, Vue takes care of this really well because it gives us ability to not have, all we have to do is just deal with the data, and once we've got that data within our Vue object, it handles all the rest of that. So we don't no longer have to loop through all these options to see if it's checked, see if it's not checked, and as we would with some other JavaScript libraries, which make it quite a bit more difficult. So it's really, Vue does this really exceptionally well, and pulling in that data within that data object and making it smart the way that it outputs that HTML. So the next lesson, we're going to look at working with lists, and lists is going to be one of the really coolest things about Vue because it gives a whole lot of functionality. If we've got a whole list of items within our data, then Vue gives us a really cool way to render this out, and it's just going to be so simple and save us a lot of coding time when we're using Vue. So that's coming up in the next lesson.